I picked this image a couple of weeks ago for this time of meditation and for the peace be still moments. The reason I did is because in Missouri, we used to get quite a bit of fog. We don't get it here like we did there. If you go drive into a river valley or creeks or whatever, Pam, you know, Kansas, same, and you get to a low area or a field or whatever, and it'll look like a cloud settle down. And there's, if you get out of your car, or you're not in your car in the first place, it's not a good idea to drive in fog in a car, I say that. But there's something about it that it feels very close, like everything's close, and it's a very peaceful feeling that you get. It's hard to describe if you haven't been in it, but that's why I picked this. It just struck me as brought back that feeling that again, when you're driving, you want to avoid fog because in Missouri, of course, like here, that you have these four-legged creatures called deer, and they can jump right out in front of you, you know, when you're driving through it. So it's not safe, but it's just one of those natural things that very small gift that we get, you know, when we're in that particular situation. There's a lot of voices of God, is what I'm saying, that come in many ways, and that was one that struck me. So we're talking today about the voice of God, the perpetual call to greater freedom. And I talk about this once in a while. It's good to keep talking about it, good to keep reminding us of it. But when we think of God's voice, we might imagine a booming sound echoing across the universe, one that would coincide with the muscular figure depicted in so many classical paintings. This picture was generated by AI. So now we know. We know what he looks like. And this particular one, we know where he lives, and that's in AI. But I thought it was interesting that somebody would ask, you know, ask AI, draw me a picture of God. And this would be kind of the collective thought, the collective image that a lot of people hold. And we may not say that, you know, we may not, well, that's the image I grew up with, basically. Mine wasn't quite that good, but he was an old man. He lived somewhere in the sky. Hubble's been after him, trying to find him, and has not done that, but Hubble's found some pretty cool things, just not God yet. Unless you consider the whole thing God, which I do. But we think of the voice of God, or we might think of the voice of God. I don't think of it that way now. I used to. That, you know, if God's going to speak, somebody's going to hear it. And you look at the Old Testament, and, you know, the voice of God is very clear. The New Testament, the voice of God is very clear. And if God doesn't speak directly, he will send a messenger, an angel, or a trumpet player, or, you know, somebody to get the message across, show up in a dream, but it's always a very clear voice. So we may think in those terms, like if we're in a place in our life where we don't really know what to do, we want the authority, the big guy, you know, to show up and tell us what to do. And it rarely happens that way. In Unity, we're most familiar with Elijah's still small voice that comes after the mighty winds and earthquakes. While the Bible often gives God a distinct and commanding voice, sometimes through a heavenly messenger, I think our best conceptualization is the still small voice given to Elijah. And that always struck me when I first started reading Unity literature, the use of that phrase, the still small voice, that I've heard the still small voice, you know, it's a feeling. And I could relate to that as it was explained. That's how God speaks to us. Because I guess I always assumed that if God was to speak, it'd be a loud, booming voice. It'd be some signal where I would know for sure, and it rarely is. It's a constant, a perpetual nudging that we often allow to be covered up by the activities of our life or distractions in life. It never stops speaking. It never stops being there. But we will turn away from it because we're looking for something more substantial. What is the still small voice? It's not really a voice at all. We should think of it more as an impulse than a voice speaking words. It is the impulse to be free. And we all have this. I've shared the idea you catch a grasshopper in your hand and it will do everything possible to get out. It has a natural impulse to be free, and not just grasshoppers, everything, anything will do that. There's a natural impulse to be free, and we share that impulse. And if you ask what prompts that, why is it so universal, it's because that creative life force that is expressing through whatever form is already free. And that impulse is to give that form, whether it's a grasshopper or a human being, the desire for more freedom, the desire for greater freedom. We will sometimes define what that freedom should look like, how it should come about, and get ourselves maybe at a dead end where the things that we're expecting don't happen. So we say, well, it must not be working, or it's, something maybe I need to speak a little louder or whatever. But the idea that I'm struggling and I'm not listening, not hearing the voice of God, I shouldn't say not listening, but we're probably trying to hear it in a way that is not speaking, in a way that is not coming across. And I think that's don't we usually, when we're looking for an answer, we want to see a resolution. When we're praying for something, we want to see a resolution, and we have a pretty good idea of how that resolution ought to look. And what's interesting about that is sometimes we have that and it doesn't work out the way we're expecting, but it does work out. It's like life just keeps happening day in and day out, and pretty soon you're not in that situation anymore. And you are, beyond it. You're not emotionally tied to it. You've gone past it. So what happened, it wasn't an immediate answer. It was like an evolution of just consciousness and situation and whatever. It looks like something is pretty firm at one point and then not so much the next. And it, to me, it seems like that's the way it usually pans out. That the voice of God is saying, freedom is yours, but it may not be exactly like you're expecting it to come about. And it may be that if you just stay with your life, through this time, that you'll see a broader picture. You'll get your power back. You'll get your strength back. You'll find that center in yourself that was lost because your attention was on the issue. And this happens to all of us. It's just that's why we have sessions like this, so we can remind ourselves there's something else. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus opens his ministry by quoting from the book of Isaiah. When we go back to the Hebrew scripture that is Isaiah, here's what we find. So he gets up in front of a crowd in the synagogue and he reads this passage. Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free and break every yoke? There's a reason that Isaiah used this imagery of the yoke, because you yoke up a couple of oxen like this and they do your work. They pull the plow, they do the labor. And so it's related to us. When we are in a situation that we're worried about, we are yoked to that problem. There's a yoke around our necks. And what Jesus is saying, the reason he quoted this scripture from Isaiah, I think, and if you read the actual passage from Luke, you'll see it's very different if you go back into Isaiah, and you'll find that this is true with a lot of scriptures that are quoted in the New Testament. They are misquoted, which is pretty interesting. Because when you go back to Isaiah, Jesus is saying, I came here to help make your life easier. And the way I'm going to do that is through teaching you how to change your mind when you are in situations where you feel burdened and yoked to a specific outcome, where somebody's got you hooked up and you're going to be doing the manual labor. And the manual labor that we're concerned about here is our fear, it's our worry, it's anything that brings us down into a lower level, a level that is unlike the freedom that we desire. So we're yoked to a perception of how something ought to work out. It's not doing that, and so we feel burdened by it. And so I think that to me is the message of the mystic. I'm here to help you change your mind, to see your life and your situations in life from a different perspective. Because how often did he say, it's say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, and people probably weren't used to hearing things like that. The mountain, this problem in your life, if you say be cast into the sea, it will be cast into the sea, if you have no doubt. He's saying change your mind. That's where I think he addressed the yoke, and I don't think that a lot of people after him, the Jesus movement that followed him, understood that. They were locked into this idea of the Messiah coming and changing the whole society and religion and everything, getting rid of the Romans and all that stuff. Whereas I think Jesus was a lot more practical. He was taking people wherever they were, and he was probably speaking mainly to the peasant class, people who were struggling. Why else would he say, don't worry about what you're going to eat, or don't worry about what you're going to wear? If he was speaking to the upper class, he wouldn't be saying that, because they're not worried about that stuff. They know what they're going to eat. They know what they're going to wear. He was speaking to people that didn't know if they were going to eat that day, and if they didn't know what they were going to wear that day. So I think he understood that. He grew up in that culture. He grew up with those people. And he said, I think I can bring something to your way of thinking that will help, that will free you from this yoke of negativity. And that to me is what his ministry was about. And then it was all misunderstood later, because people did not believe that if you just change your mind, it'll change your life. They believed they needed a warrior like Messiah to come in and make the change for them. They had been expecting that for so long, they couldn't stop. They couldn't quit. I think while Jesus was alive, I think he did inspire them. I think that was the root of his following. Although I think people, like with any of this kind of teaching, they followed him for the money as well, for the food, for the benefits, rather than actually learning how to do what he was talking about. He was saying many are called and few answer, and I think that's what he was saying, that few will understand what I'm talking about. But I'm going to talk about it anyway, and hopefully you will get it. Some of you will get it, some of you won't. There's 4 levels of soil. There's bad soil, and it goes all the way to the good soil. I realize I'm talking to a wide range of people, a wide range of understanding. And so that is, I think he understood that fully. And I think he understood that probably the minority of people would get what he was talking about. And I believe that's true today. As Beth and I were coming in, we were just noticing again, the parking lots of all the traditional churches are pretty full. And pretty interesting. But that's the message not of Jesus, but of Paul. That's what they're getting. And I think we're closer to the message of Jesus here, and I'm not necessarily comparing. I'm just saying that when you read a lot of what he said, he's saying change your mind. The kingdom of God is within you. If you want to let it out, you've got to open the gate. You've got to open that narrow gate of your thinking. And you've got to put your faith into what you want to have change. Something in you's got to change. It's not going to drop down out of the sky. I was doing a comparison of the paradigm of oneness and the paradigm of separation. The paradigm of separation, the kingdom of heaven, it's a coming attraction. The paradigm of oneness, it's a present reality. And I think he was speaking from the paradigm of oneness. You are in a place where you can draw from a mind power that will change the way you experience your life. And I think if you were sitting around a campfire with a person like Jesus, he wouldn't be promising you the moon, that if you think positive, you'll become wealthy like a Sadducee or a Pharisee or one of these religious professionals. But you will appreciate your life more. You'll get up and you'll go about your business with a better attitude. You'll have higher expectation of greater good unfolding through you. Maybe somebody will come over and help you with your harvest, or maybe you'll catch an extra fish that day, or maybe your crop will do a little bit better this year, or whatever. But not promising the moon, but promising that if you begin to change the way you think and the way you change your level of expectation, that the quality of your life will follow. It'll come along with that. So that's not real appealing to a lot of people that are in dire need. If you're speaking to the peasant class, they're looking for, I'm poor and I need help today. I don't know what I'm going to eat. I don't know what I'm going to wear. So that message may not have resonated with a lot of them. Why do you worry about what you're going to eat or what you're going to wear? And they could tell him why they're going to worry about it. Because they don't have food and they don't have, they're wearing rags. So, and I totally understand that. I have said before, if I stopped at on one of these corners with one of the people holding up a sign wanting money, if I said, I don't have a lot of money to give you, but I can teach you something. I can teach you that if you change your mind, it'll change your life in some way. How many do you think would want to listen to me? Probably not too many. There may be some. I've encountered people that did. We had a guy at the other church that stopped by. He was a war vet. I took him to the homeless shelter, but had to stay 20 feet away from him, to put up with him. But a very nice guy. He was said, I have made a choice to live this life. He said, I just wanted to cut loose of everything. I got out of a marriage. I got out of a job. I've got out from under a mortgage, and I want to travel. And I want to do it for nothing. And so he was pretty much doing it for nothing. But so he could have taught me something. You never know who your teacher's going to be. You never know who's going to show up with something to show you. But I was real impressed with this fellow. I gave him all the food we had in the refrigerator over there at the time, and I gave him a ride. But it's a person like that would listen probably. Well, he didn't need to listen. He was making his own choice to live his life as he wanted to live it. But I doubt that 99% of the people in the shelter were doing the same thing, or maybe they were. I don't know. But that's we get judgmental when we're looking at that situation. But I do know that poverty is a way of life. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of expectation. And so is prosperity. It's a way of life. And we want to shift our perception into, if we want to change our life, we want to shift our perception into new ways of thought, new levels of expectation, and all of that. If you want to travel with no money, no food, and just, get what you get, you want to have that adventure, you can do it. And that is a self-motivated person. To me, that was a prosperous person. I would define him as a prosperous person. Not in the outer sense, no prosperity trappings, but a prosperous attitude. And he felt his needs would be met, and they were through people like me, just the way it is, the way it works sometimes. I don't want to live that way. I've been, as I've said, so broke I couldn't pay attention before. And I don't like that. Maybe you've been that way too. But my grandparents grew up during the Depression, and they knew what it was like to be broke. And they learned how to live from that point of view, and they learned how to do it successfully. I always loved being around them. I always felt they were very prosperous people. I didn't understand all that poverty stuff. I didn't understand depression and all of that. All I understood is they had a 250-acre farm. I had a BB gun, and that was a good combination. So we loved going there and playing outside, being, in nature. And I felt prosperous, when I didn't know what they had to do to keep the farm going. He had some cattle. He probably made a little money on the farm, but he was a deputy sheriff. He drove 30 miles, I think, to work to help pay for that farm. Anyway, by this account, it's clear that the focus of Jesus' ministry is to let the oppressed go free and to break every yoke. He also says that those who have learned from the Father will come to him. In other words, those who have learned to listen to the still small voice of God will understand what he's talking about. That verse has always stood out to me, that those who have learned from the Father come to me. First of all, it says Jesus is not saying the Father is mine only. I'm the only begotten. That's a very strong statement compared to what we've learned. That your Father, whoever has learned to learn from their Father, will understand what I'm talking about. That is, if you have some sense that the full power of God is within you, it's not something that's going to drop out of the sky, it's within you, and you can start speaking that into expression, you'll understand when I say, if you say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, it'll obey, because you are tapped into infinite power. Most people will sit around twiddling their thumbs, not knowing what to do in a situation. Well, we all do that from time to time. But instead of do that, we begin to affirm the full power and life of God is now expressing through me. We start getting new ideas. We start seeing new openings. We start seeing new possibilities. The world that we are in begins to respond to us. And again, it may not be anything earth-shaking. It may be very, very quiet. It may not come the day you're praying for it. It may come a few days later. It may come a week later. And haven't you ever realized that you're glad that the thing you were praying for didn't come about? So I made a little poster about that. If I got everything I wanted, I'd be dead. I would have died in a candy store a long time ago of overdose on sugar. And I still remember wanting endless candy. Well, I still do, actually, but I don't do that. I try to avoid it now. But if you get everything you want, it may kill you. It's very possible. Or it may make your life miserable. Again, I remember growing up in my grade school, thinking if I wanted a certain girl to fall in love with me, and I wanted to do some heroic act like save her from a pack of wolves, which we did not have, but if we did, I would have saved her. But it's didn't happen, and I am so glad that it didn't. And not anything against her, it's just there is a vibrational compatibility that probably wasn't there when we got older. In fact, we crossed paths when we got older, and I said, thank God those wolves were not in our neighborhood. Has anybody else had a stupid fantasy like that? We could probably spend a couple hours here today. But that was important to me then, and I'm glad that prayer was not answered. I'm glad that desire was not fulfilled. And it's, that's kind of an extreme case. But, at that age, you have a certain mindset. And when you are under attack in your life, you have a certain mindset. And so you may pray for a particular solution that makes sense to that mindset, but it may not make sense in the bigger picture. And so that's why we would say this or something better. Because what you're really praying for is to get out of that mindset. That's the beginning. That's the change of mind, the first thing. That's the first thing that changes. That's your Messiah, the ability to change your mind. It's not somebody that's going to drop out of the clouds. And that's why churches are full. When you go out, the traditional churches are full because they're being told that your answer will drop out of a cloud. And so you need to be involved here. You need to be in good standing. So when that happens, and nobody knows when, that's a great psychological instrument that was employed by the gospel writers. Nobody knows when it's going to happen. So thank goodness we weren't hanging around back when this all started, because we'd be waiting 2,000 years. And that doesn't sound too inviting to me. Why do we crave freedom? Because the soul is already free. At the spiritual level, there are no restrictions. We encounter restrictions at the physical and material levels. And we don't want to deny that. There are restrictions at the physical level. Let's not pretend that's not true, because it is. Jesus is teaching people how to work with these seeming contradictory conditions. While most were waiting for the Messiah to appear and set them free, Jesus was teaching that freedom begins as a perceptual shift. Perceptual shift. That's not real exciting. It's more exciting to think somebody's going to drop out of the sky and save us from all of this mess that we're in. A perceptual shift is something I can do, but it's hard. So I don't want to do it. I'll take a drug, or I'll take something. That'll be my perceptual shift. But you know how long that lasts. So it's actually something you have to commit to. Jesus said if you put your hand to the plow and you turn away, you're not fit for the kingdom. That's what he's saying. A perceptual shift is something you've got to stay with. Do I believe this appearance is working out for the highest good of all? Do I really believe that? Well, if you don't say you do, because you're going to struggle with that. You're going to struggle with yourself. You're going to compound the problem. But what you want to do is get to the place where you can say that and mean it. Not because you have any evidence that it's true, but because you understand the principle. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. That's what we call the law of mind action. And if you hold those thoughts, I prefer the word expectation, because I would equate that with what we call faith. Faith and expectation, one and the same thing. You say, where's your faith? Well, my faith is in God. Where's your expectation? It's in the world's falling apart quickly. If we can bring those two things together, my faith and my expectation are one and the same. And so I'm in this situation now, and I'm actually feeling my expectation is at a place. I don't know how it's going to work out, but it will in some way. So it's a thing that we have to sometimes stay with moment by moment. You achieve freedom in a moment, and then you got to re-achieve it the next moment. That's a very common thing. We want the answer. We want the solution. We want to be able to stop worrying about this thing. And that is a perceptual shift. If you seek first the kingdom of God, that is, if you learn to heed the quiet voice of God, it will help clarify your vision and make straight your path. So, how does the voice of God show up? If you're in a situation where you're feeling afraid, you're feeling miserable, you're feeling uncertain, that's actually the voice of God. Why would we feel uncertain? Why would we feel afraid if we didn't know better? If we were intended to live at the level of fear, fear wouldn't bother us. It'd be our normal state. But because it does bother us, that's the voice of God. You're experiencing fear because something needs your attention. There's a perceptual shift that needs your attention in this moment. And so if we can get to the point where we can approach it from that attitude, from that perspective, that I'm feeling afraid and my inclination is to fix whatever is making me afraid. But if I say to myself, I'm feeling afraid because I'm not being true to myself, because I was not given a spirit of fear. I was given a spirit of power and love. So I'm not being true to myself right now. That's the perceptual shift. I bring myself back to the place where I'm recentered in that presence, that power. I don't have to go out and change the world, I change myself. And that's not really that hard. It's not that hard. You just have to be mindful. Though we may not have connected the inner impulse to be free with the voice of God. Let me start over. Though we may not have connected the inner impulse to be free with the voice of God, doing so will help us realize that we desire freedom because our soul is free already. We're being prompted at all times to claim our inherent freedom. That's another interesting perception to hold. I desire free because my soul is already free. This is whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe you've already received it because you have. And that's, if you stop and think that light is shining in me, I will stop blocking that light. I will stop blocking it with my fear, my doubts, my feelings of uncertainty. And I will let that light shine, and I will let it remove the barriers that are keeping me in this state of mind that is not so free. And you'll discover, and you can go through the whole beat yourself up thing for as long as you want. We've all got tickets to do that. We've got permission from the universe. You can beat yourself up as long as you want. Nobody's going to lose any sleep over it except you and me. But you'll come to the point where what I'm saying here will make sense, and you'll make a perceptual shift. And you'll say, okay, I'll let my light shine. I don't know how. I just do. I let it shine. And that light will dissolve all of the negativity in you first. You'll find your center of power, and you'll carry that out in your daily life. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Thanks again for your interest in independent unity, and have a wonderful week.